Good evening, councillors and members of the public. Before we commence the meeting, as usual, I'd like to draw your attention to the fire regulations, which are on the screen behind me. No practice alarms tonight, so if the alarm does go, please leave the building as quickly as possible. We're assembled across the road in front of Waitrose. Can I ask everyone to switch their phones to silent or to off? Members of the public, I'd like to say as a committee we understand the matters under consideration tonight can be emotive. However, please be respectful of those around you and of the committee and refrain from any booing, cheering or any other form of disturbance. Moving on, I'd like to introduce the officers in front of me. On the far right there is Lewis Jones, our planning lawyer, then Paul McKim, head of planning. Next is Ruth Dovey, the area team leader, then Rachel Callis, principal planning officer, followed by Beth Hunt-Smith, the development control manager, and then our deputy development control manager, Patrick Arthurs, at the far left there. So with that, let's move to the agenda item number 1. Please, can I ask you to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of April? They've been laid on the table for half an hour. Can I sign them as a true record? Thank you. Apologies for absence, Fiona.
Thank you, Chairman. I've had apologies from councillors David Else, Mike Band, Val Henry and Simon Inchbold, and Councillor Patricia Ellis and Jim Edwards are attending as substitutes tonight.
Thank you very much indeed. Declarations of interest. Fiona?
None received, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Moving on. Question 4. Questions by members of the public. Fiona?
None received.
Okay. Questions from members. Fiona?
None received.
Thank you. And Beth, performance against government targets.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 5 of your agenda, members will see the planning services performance against the 2 government targets on speed and quality, and you'll see that we are continuing to perform excellently against these. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Before we move into the main item, I'd like to propose to the committee that the applications be taken out of order and the NMA for East Street be taken first. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Is that agreed, members? Agreed. So we move then to item 8. Application for planning permission and non-material amendment 2019-0059, land at East Street, Farnham. It's pages 81 to 104 of your agenda. The proposed amendment to WA 2016-0268 for amendments to the building named D15 as amended by plans received on the 10th of April 2019. And I ask the case officer, Ruth Dovey, to introduce.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So this application is for a non-material amendment to the East Street redevelopment scheme. And this first slide gives you provides you with an aerial photograph of the site. And I have had an arrow on which shows the area of the site in question where a proposed change to the redevelopment would occur. Just for clarity, this is prior to any, this aerial photograph is prior to any redevelopment occurring. So this slide is the master plan for the East Street redevelopment scheme and what has been approved. So just to go over a bit of background and to remind you all of some planning history to this site. Planning permission was granted for a redevelopment scheme and implemented under application reference number 2012-0912. And the application granted the following: a mixed-use development comprising 9,814 square metres of retail, restaurant and cafe bar accommodation in use class A1, A3 and A4, including the change of use of Brightwell House and Marlborough Head, 239 residential units, class C3, a multi-screen cinema, class D2, multi-storey service and basement car parks providing a total of 426 spaces, associated highway and access works, provision of infrastructure and landscaping, replacement facility for the existing Gostry Centre, demolition and clearance of the site. So condition 3 of this permission set out the approved drawing numbers. Then a subsequent Section 73 minor material amendment application was submitted in 2016, which sought to make various changes to the main development, and this application was approved. And condition 2 of this 2016 permission also set out the approved drawing numbers for the development. So this application is for a non-material amendment to condition 2 to make changes to the scheme and to the approved drawing numbers to enable amendments to be made to one of the proposed buildings on the site. That building is known as D15, and again I have just provided an arrow that shows you the area of the site in which that building is located. Building D15 is a wholly residential building providing affordable housing, and it comprises 15 residential units. So the applicant's rationale for the change is that the proposal would provide a more efficient layout to this building and a more comfortable relationship between the building and the northern boundary of the site, and we'll see that through the course of this presentation. Councillors should note that this isn't a planning application, it's an application for a non-material amendment. So in deciding whether a change is material, the planning authority must have regard to the effect of the change, together with any previous non-material changes on the planning permission as originally granted. In other words, the planning merits of the proposed amendments are not before the council. The focus is really whether on the proposed amendments are significant or not, and by that we mean whether they are material or not. So this is an extract from the ground floor master plan that zooms in. I've tried to zoom into the specific building in question, and apologies, they're not the same orientation. I have tried, and it didn't work. But effectively, this is the northern boundary of the site here, and this is the northern boundary of the site here. So hopefully what you can see is that the building is coming away from, it's very close to this boundary as approved, and it's coming further away from the boundary as proposed. There are various other shifts to the building, which I will take you through on a comparative overlay drawing, because I think you'll get a better idea of the changes. There's also internal reconfiguration of the building at all levels and amendments to the refuse and cycle store area, which you might just be able to see in this area here on the approved drawings, and here on the proposed. And again, you can see that structure has been taken away from the boundary. So the number of residential units, their tenure, and the number of car and cycle parking spaces all remain the same. So I'll just take you through. So this is the approved and proposed ground floor plan. So you can see that, hopefully you can see that configuration of the units is largely the same, but there are some modest changes. This is the approved and proposed first floor plan. Approved and proposed second floor plan. And this is the overlay that I was referring to earlier. And this is in the agenda report. So the purple lines that you can see reflect the development as approved, and the blue lines reflect the development as proposed. So just to give you some orientation again, this is the northern boundary of the site. So you can see the building coming away from the northern boundary. You can see going towards the western boundary, it pops out slightly, and I think the maximum distance it pops out is 622 millimetres. It then also, hopefully you can see that this frontage here moves forward slightly, and that's by a maximum of 987 millimetres. And then probably quite difficult to see on here is that there is a very slight, it encroaches slightly further to the boundary here by 366 millimetres. So although the footprint of the building is changing slightly, actually there aren't any significant changes to the elevations of the building. The key changes really pertain to some windows here and here, and there's just a very slightly amended design to what is now proposed with these windows here and here, but they're broadly reflective of the same proportions. It's more a detailed design change. And you also have the provision of railings in front of some double doors, some patio doors at ground floor level here and here that weren't included on the approved drawings. So, as already stated in my presentation, the key consideration is whether the changes are material or not. So, the list on this slide really reflects where there are potential changes that may or may not have material implications. So, turning first to the matter of visual amenity. Officers of the view that the floor plans and the elevations show that there are only very minor changes to the elevations. So on that basis, we're satisfied that within the context of the overall redevelopment scheme, in terms of visual amenity, the changes are not material. With regard to residential amenity, we've seen that the building actually steps away from the northern boundary of the site. So that's an improvement in terms of neighbouring amenity. And whilst it does slightly encroach a bit further to the boundary just here, that's very minimal, and there are actually no windows on the neighbouring property facing towards the site. So in that respect, those changes again are considered to be non-material. With regards to highways, car parking, cycle parking, so I've already mentioned the level of car parking provision doesn't change. And with regard to the cycle parking provision, although there's a slight reconfiguration of the space, it's still the same number of cycle parking spaces provided. There are no changes to the pavement or the highway as a result of the proposal, and Surrey County Highway Authority have raised no objection to the application. In terms of the quality of the accommodation, there are some changes to the unit sizes, but these aren't considered to be significant, and in fact the proposal brings overall benefits because all the units, with the exception of one, would increase in floor area, albeit very slightly, and the one that doesn't increase in floor area just remains the same. So on this basis, given that these changes in floor area are modest, again we consider the change to be non-material. And with regard to refuse and recycling, the waste officer has reviewed the proposals and is satisfied that the development would provide the appropriate level of refuse and does not consider the changes to be significant. As set out in the report, it's also important to consider, when you're considering a non-material amendment, it's also important to consider that within the context of any other non-material amendment applications that have been made, and whether the cumulative impact of all those results in it being a material change overall when all those other changes are taken into account. We have listed on page 94 of the officer's report all those NMAs that have been allowed on this site. There is one NMA in that list that isn't included, and that was actually an NMA that was brought before the planning committee, and the reason why that NMA isn't included is because that was actually withdrawn by the applicant, so it wasn't determined in the end. But officers are of the view that having regard to all the NMAs that have been granted on this site and what is currently before us now, that the proposal does comprise a non-material amendment and is acceptable. I should just draw your attention to the written update sheet, which I think was circulated a few days ago. And in addition to that, I do have a verbal update because the Metropolitan Thames Valley Housing Association have confirmed that they raise no objection to the proposed changes, and they are the housing association who would take on the affordable housing. And I also have a verbal update regarding highways matters. Surrey County Council are satisfied that the revised design would still allow for safe access of all vehicles, including articulated delivery vehicles, and that the proposal does not change the width or the alignment of the carriageway. There has been a swept path analysis drawing that's been submitted as part of the Section 278 drawings that demonstrates access for articulated lorries can be achieved without vehicles having to overrun the footway. There's also an additional drawing that forms part of the Section 278 details, which shows that the area that will be adopted as public highway is within the red line, so the revised building line does not encroach into the area that will be public highway for anybody who had concerns about that. And finally, there's no intention for buses to use this section of road. All buses, the agreement will be that all buses will be routed via East Street, but the swept path analysis that Surrey County Highways have seen shows that a bus can use Brightwell's Road if required. And finally, with regard to any concerns about taxi drop-off and pick-up, the approved development, which is an implemented scheme, doesn't make any provision for taxi drop-off or pick-up. So on the basis of all that, officers are recommending that this non-material amendment be allowed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Members. Oh, sorry, Councillor Townsend. And
thank you, Chairman. Just one clarification point on the update sheet where the red line boundary was changed. Was that just an error on the main report, from the main report, or has that actually changed?
No, sorry, just to clarify, that was an error. So the red line has not changed between the approved development and what is now proposed.
Councillor Hyman.
Thank you, Chairman. I think all members have received a report which I put out showing that the existing design is inappropriate, as track vehicles do have to are shown to be driving across the pavements, and they have to drive into the paved areas to get around that very sharp bend. I checked yesterday actually that the design, the framework, the design statement from 2008 states that that is, and shows with a diagram that that is the bus route. The buses will be going around there, and it does show in the swept track diagrams from 2008 that buses also will need to cut those corners, and this moves a building. Now, you know, I think it's absolutely farcical that we're here being told that moving a building is not material. Whether or not it makes it more dangerous for the pedestrians, which it obviously does. I mean, for Surrey County Council to say it doesn't change the width of the carriageway, that's not the point. The track change, the swept track diagrams show that those vehicles do not stay on the carriageway. They drive across the pavements, and I think I've proved that. But quite frankly, I mean, I find this quite ridiculous that this is being put forward as an NMA by the applicant. They have previously put in NMAs to commence development, chopping down trees, changing conditions that prevented them from commencing the development of this scheme without designing it properly. They're continuing. It would be terrible if we made the mistake of the design of this building, which in the first place was designed to avoid a large lime tree, which you can see on the plans which are in your committee papers. They're moving this because they assumed that they could chop down one of Ken Kent's ash trees, and obviously they can't, so they're moving the building away. They're not changing it to take account of the fact the lime tree was chopped down 8 years ago, where they could have much more efficient use of space. We're not here to consider that. We're here to consider whether it's material or not. And obviously moving a building is material in any sense at all. And I do think there is another very good reason why actually we cannot grant consent. If I refer you to page 92 of your report, you'll see that it says the applicant, page 92 at the top, the applicant is proposing the following amended wording to condition 2 to reflect the revised plans. And if you look at that, it has absolutely no plans for D4 in there. It doesn't have any of the floor plans for D6. It's just got one elevation in there. It doesn't have the third floor plans for this. There is so many different plans missing from that that we cannot agree to those as a revision. What we should have in front of us is a correction. An NMA can be used to correct it, but we've got this completely wrong. I can understand where the problem came from when the variation of conditions application was put through in 2016. There was no proper scrutiny, of course. It was party-line decision-making. Nobody bothered checking anything. You ignored what the public told you completely when the decision was made to agree the variation. There was a big mess-up because half of the plans were missed out of the list. They're still not there. We cannot agree to this. And that is a position which I don't think anyone can counter. But of course you can completely ignore it again if you're going to carry on with the sort of decision-making we've seen for the East Street scheme over the past 15 years. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Goodrich.
Chairman, I am satisfied that this is a DMA. I think, yes, we're moving a building. We're moving it a very small amount. The point I just wanted to have confirmation about is, of course, the scale of some of the drawings on pages 88, 89, 90 are not the same for the proposed and the approved. They can't be, otherwise we're building a very much bigger building if one compares the two by way of scale. But that's, I'm assuming it's there to show us the different layouts rather than the scale. But I am totally satisfied that this is a DMA and that it is minor, and we're advised by our officers that it's a DMA, and I can see no reason why it shouldn't be.
Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask officers to confirm that with the buses, because it was suggested by officers that there weren't going to be buses going through there, but they could go through there. Councillor Hyman referred to the fact that buses will be going through there, and I'd just like to know the absolute truth of that one. Do you have a copy of the swept path analysis, just so we can see where Surrey are saying these vehicles go, just so I can understand exactly where Councillor Hyman is getting to on this? And final question I would ask, as I don't know if it was pointed as a question, as Councillor Hyman has intimated that there are plans missing from that condition, could you just confirm whether that's actually true or not? Thank you.
Ruth, when you've got a moment.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yes, I do have a copy of some plans that the County Highway have reviewed in connection with the 278 works, and confirmation that they are totally happy with that swept path analysis. With regard to the buses, I think we have to remember this application has evolved somewhat over the course of time, because obviously the original permission was 2008. So I think there was, in 2008, an agreement that the buses would be routed through Brightwells Road. But certainly that is not the current intention. The intention that has been agreed between the applicant and the County Highway Authority is that the buses will go along East Street. And the County Highway Authority have reassured me today of that fact. But what they've also said, I think just to provide comfort, is that they are happy that with the swept path diagrams, even if buses were to route through that particular section, they are happy that that all works from a highway safety perspective.
And the missing plans?
Yes, sorry. And so in terms of the list of drawings in the approved condition 2, that isn't relevant to what the committee are considering this evening. What we are considering are plans relating to building D15 that were included in the list under condition 2 of the 2016 permission, and we are able, under this NMA application, to amend those drawing numbers to enable the amendment to building 15.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got to say that even with the presentation in the chamber tonight, I found it very difficult to see that there is any significant changes to the original plans. In fact, I'd almost conclude they're rather insignificant. Now, I've taken on board that there is a measure of improvement in room sizes, but it's still extremely disappointing that out of the 15 units, 7 of them are still substandard. And I find that, you know, these days going forward, and I'm pleased to say that in our planning meetings, although we don't yet have the national space standards included, although we have an intention to do so, we do deal with these things here and now. And I must say it's pretty awful that our developers are still being allowed to get away with substandard accommodation. Because when it is substandard, it's not even meeting minimum standards, let alone, you know, improvements on that. And I agree with Councillor Goodridge that these particular floor plans are, well, I'm finding the floor plans particularly confusing. I'm hoping that in the future floor plans will be shown rather as the approved ones are here, without having multiple lines across the floor and totally confusing what there is meant to be there and what there isn't meant to be there as real things. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hyman, you want to come back?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I think Councillor Follows asked the question in respect of do we have some tracked sweat path tracks for the available, and I think we want to see those if we can. I think the idea was that we see them rather than just be told, yeah, we've seen some. Can we see those, please? Because if Surrey Highways are telling us that all the vehicles will be staying within the road, then that's not true. I know it's untrue for a fact, and I've put out the documents to everyone, and everyone else here can tell that. So I do have a problem with that. Again, I refer to page 92. The applicant is proposing the following amended wording. If the applicant is proposing amended wording to condition 2, and that is what he is proposing, and we know that that is not correct, then we should not be granting this, certainly at all, let alone as a non-material amendment. Of course, it's not, you know, we can't consider it non-material for us to agree something which we know is wrong and incomplete. The fact that it has been like that for 2 or 3 years nearly is relatively immaterial, actually, because you know, they are entitled to come and change it when the mistake is known. We know the mistake is there. Officers know the mistake is there. They won't answer the question in respect of whether this is incomplete, because half of the plans are missing from the list here. If you compare this with the 2012-0912 permission, which this varied. So, but the real issue, is this a material, non-material amendment or not? The definition under section 96, it's a system whereby any alterations which no one would consider needed to come before a committee, no one would be interested in, and most importantly, there are no consultation requirements. Okay, so the line we have to draw here when we're considering it is, would anyone expect to be consulted? Would we consult with anybody? And obviously, if we're consulting with Surrey Highways, if we're consulting with the Thames Valley Housing, and if we're having it put in front of us here, then it quite obviously isn't an NMA by definition. The issue here is whether or not consultation is deemed to be necessary, whether anybody would want to know about this. If you are moving a building, then it can't be deemed non-material, because obviously people would need to know about that, particularly if you're moving it further towards the pavement. If the pavement is narrow and needs to be redesigned or has trucks going across it anyway, it cannot possibly be considered non-material. The issue which has just been raised in respect of the room sizes, again, if anybody feels that they should comment upon that, then this is not a non-material amendment. People need to understand what section 96A is about. It's for changing the sizes of windows where nobody can see them. It's for various small things. You could use NMA to change the list that you've got of plans where it was a genuine mistake. But you know, whether or change the wording of a condition where that was an error or where it makes absolutely no difference to anyone whatsoever for some reason, and that does happen. But that's what NMAs are for. This is not an NMA, and for members here to keep just parroting the party line of, oh, we're going to grant consents to these, I think it's disgraceful, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I was going to make it myself. You want to come in, Councillor Hunter, first?
Councillor Hyman sends an email at 3 o'clock this morning. I woke up at 6 o'clock and went to work. I've got no time to read his email or digest it in any way. And at no time I ever been whipped in a planning application. So I take exception to his statements that we've been whipped to vote for or against the planning application.
Totally agree with that. We have not been whipped and will not be whipped. Paul, did you want to come in on the 96, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I just want to come back on the Section 96A position. There are no hard and fast rules on NMAs. There are general legal concepts around materiality, de minimis and context. And the context here is that we're talking about a large-scale residential scheme. In total, for the whole of the Brightwell scheme, it's 386 and 190 square foot. And this development is FD15, is 14,802 square foot. So in terms of scale, that is the context. So it's small in scale in terms of its context. In terms on other matters, there's no EIA grounds, as there are no consequential changes, and there are no changes to the red line. As Ruth has mentioned, we've taken into account the cumulative impacts, and they're reflected in the report to you. We've simply brought this report forward because we're aware that the Council has an interest in the scheme, and we thought for matters of transparency, it was best that it came forward to this committee. So I'll just reiterate, there are no hard fast rules around NMA.
Thank you very much. Councillor Anna Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. Could the officers just confirm or not confirm, as Councillor Hyam says, that the building on the far bottom right-hand side, is it actually going onto a pavement or is it still off the pavement? And secondly, can you please remind Councillor Hyam not to say we know and we cannot, and could he keep his references to himself and say I, because he doesn't speak for me. I take advice from our officers. Thank you.
Ruth, you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so the building does not encroach into the pavement. And if we look at this drawing here, this is effectively the pavement. And you can see that the corner will be close to the back of the pavement, but won't encroach over it. Can I also just comment on floor? Just there's been some discussion about the floor area of the units. And the fact that a lot of them are substandard. And I think committee just has to remember that this application was originally approved in 2008 when we didn't have nationally prescribed space standards. Then again approved in 2012. We have an implemented, so we're effectively dealing with a historical permission, but it has been implemented. So whilst I acknowledge, as well from a planning perspective, it would be ideal to have all these units according with the space standards. We cannot require that to be the case, given that they have an implemented permission where a number of the units don't. So there is a benefit to this amendment in that most of the units will see a slight floor space increase.
Thank you. Councillor Follows, you want to come back?
So just to clarify on one of Councillor Hyman's points, so I understand absolutely truthfully, the fact that you've had to go to some level of consultation in order to bring it to this point does not invalidate it as an NMA by default. The other question I would add, and this is sort of more as much for Councillor Hyman as it is for officers, if you've brought it to committee for transparency reasons, I don't understand what else we would do other than bring it back to committee for review if we did determine that it wasn't a non-material amendment. So, I mean, what would change if we were to refuse it on those grounds anyway? We were already here discussing it. We would just be discussing it again in a different capacity. Would that be the truth in this?
Paul?
On the first point, yes, in terms of consultation, that doesn't affect its status as an NMA. In relation to bring it forward, as head of service, I do have delegated powers to determine NMNAs. Members do have the ability to call that in if they should wish to do so. I've just taken the decision for transparency purposes to bring it forward.
Mr. Chair, may I just respond to that quickly? What would happen if we refused it then, just so I'm aware for procedural purposes?
Well, there's no appeal process, so it would just fall away.
Councillor Munn.
Thank you, Chairman. And to say something constructive, I think if there is an error in the plans on page 92, then I would just ask officers to speak to the applicant, and if they need to use an NMA, one which perhaps wouldn't need to come to committee to get the plans correct. Secondly, I always enjoy getting emails from Councillor Hyman. They're such a rattling good yarn. But could he please send them earlier? I endorse Councillor Hunter's comment. If we are to read these things and digest them, I, for one, need really almost as much time as the papers. And I appreciate often it'll come out from the papers, but could we have 48 hours at least? Otherwise, how can we do justice to them? I know how much effort Councillor Hammond puts into them, and surely he wants us to be able to get the benefits of his erudition, and that means having a bit of time. And lastly, it's so obvious it needn't be stated, no one is whipped on planning matters, and it is just offensive to suggest that they are. And lastly, unless Councillor Hyman has recently been raised to the royalty, yes, the word we is not appropriate. He can speak for himself and no one else. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coburn.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think I'm actually going to repeat what the officers have said, but I remember when I was first on this council, I couldn't understand why anybody came in for an NMA. Just to me, you know, you got your planning permission, and I remember Michael Blower, a lot of people will still know Michael, an architect who was then on, and he said, well, it just happens sometimes that you get permission, and then when you actually start to build, you realise that something could be slightly improved, and that was my introduction to NMAs. As Paul has said, you know, you've got to look at it in the context of where it sits and how big or small it is in relation. A lot of us have had reservations about this scheme, including the sizes of the units. They're still small, but they're getting bigger, so at least there are benefits to this. And, you know, we should applaud any improvement we can get to any scheme, and this certainly gives a little more space. I agree with Councillor Lee. I'd like it to be right up, but it was a long, long time ago, and things have moved on since then. I fully take this to be a non-material amendment. I'm glad it's here. I mean, we've had all sorts of issues over the years with things being done and not brought to committee, and then things being brought to committee that people said really didn't need to be. You really can't win on this one. But you have to look at it as honestly and openly as you can, see in the great scheme of things whether this is small or large. And as far as I can see, this is a very minor change, a change for the better of a scheme that many of us have reservations about. But, you know, where we do make advantages, then we should applaud it.
Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to come back. I just have one thing to ask officers. What was the reason to move the building forward? Because I do have slight concerns for residential amenity for the people living within the buildings, getting so close to the pavement. bringing an area which looks like on the plans is going to be a lounge area straight onto the corner of the pavement there, whereas before there was a little buffer zone. And again, the other areas as well, bringing them forward so near to the edge of the pavement and losing that buffer does give me a little bit of concern for the residential amenity of the people that are going to actually be living there. So I just wondered, why did it have to be moved from the northern boundary and moved so near to the pavement?
Ruth?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so the applicant has advised that effectively what they're trying to achieve is a more efficient layout to the building, and presumably the knock-on effect of that is as well that you have a sort of slightly larger size of unit generally, and that they wanted a more comfortable relationship between the building and the northern boundary. Just in terms of your concerns about it coming just that bit further forward to the pavement, I mean, it's effectively a change of, I think it's a maximum of 9.87 millimetres. So it was already pretty close to the pavement. So I think we would say that very minor move forward would be acceptable in this instance.
Must be more than 9.78 millimetres.
987 millimetres, sorry.
Right, Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chairman. I won't major on this council's long and interesting history about definitions of NMAs and my and many other people's concerns that they have been not used in the way that which we would have expected them, which naturally makes one overcautious whenever anything with an NMA comes before us, particularly with this rather contentious development in Farnham. I have had representations from a couple of my constituents, ward members, whatever we might care to call them, who are keen cyclists, and they have looked at this movement towards the pavement, and they seem to feel that this bend will be tightened, that buses, if they do go there, which they might, and large pantechnicons, lorries, whatever, will be running over the curb as almost a matter of course. We see this in every sharp bend we have in Farnham Town, where railings are knocked over with monotonous regularity. And I heard a request earlier to look at the swept path analysis, and I haven't seen it yet. So I'm afraid my concerns have slightly increased. Thank you.
Thank you. Just Chair.
Okay, so top left is your standard rigid bus, and then you can see in the middle there is an image of a standard rigid bus. Second one down on the left is the tracking for a articulated, an FTA design articulated vehicle, and that is that type of vehicle is shown in the second image down at the top of the centre underneath the bus. And then the third image on the left is that's tracking for a large car, and that is the third vehicle image in the centre at the top. And then immediately under, so that is the tracking that shows them going round the bend that I think Councillor Ward was referring to. And then the other images relate to, so the one immediately in the middle, immediately below the car, that's just showing, because there's vehicular access into the courtyard of the building at the back, that is showing tracking for that for a large car, as is the one below. And then the ones on the right also refer to tracking for a large car, but that is outside of the application site.
Chairman, is there an articulated vehicle tracking diagram that we can zoom in on to instead of, because we can't actually see anything, well, can we? This is the problem, we can't actually see anything. I must say Surrey Highways have confirmed that they are happy with the tracking and it complies with their regulations, and I'm sorry, they are the experts, we are not. I'm not an HGV driver or a bus driver. But some of us can look at swept track diagrams and understand them, you know, Chairman. We want to know whether they are staying within the roadway or whether it is crossing the pavement. And obviously the ones from 2007 are quite clear that they do not, you know, the trucks have to drive right across the paved areas. And,
Surrey Highways today confirmed that they are satisfied with the swept vehicle analysis. So, thank you, Ruth. Is there anything else on that one? Nope. Thank you, Fiona. I think members will move to the recommendation, which is remains as set out on page 103, that the non-material amendment application be approved. Can I have those in favour, please show. Those against? Oh, sorry.
In favour? Sorry. 17.
Those against? 4. Abstentions? None. Okay. So the recommendation is approved. Thank you, members. Let's move then to A2. Thank you, Ruth. Find the right piece of paper. Application for Planning Commission, WA 2018-2032, land north of the runway extension, Dunsfold Park, Stovall's Hill, Cranley. Pages 7 to 80 in the agenda. The proposal, I'm sure you can all read it, is a hybrid application consisting of full application and also on line 5, the outline application for the erection of 4 additional buildings. This application is accompanied by an environmental statement addendum, which is supplementary to the original Dunsfold Park ES submitted under WA 2015-2395. And to introduce is Rachel Callis.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. Start with the location plan for the site. I'm sure most of you will be very familiar with Dunsfold Park. You'll see just here the existing entrance in Stovold's Hill leading into the site. And this is the area in question just here. So that's just to the east of the existing employment area at the site. Turning now to an aerial view of the existing site, you'll see the site outlined in red for you, and that's in the top right-hand corner as you view it. This is the existing access coming down into the site, and you'll see it's just to the edge of the existing employment centre at the site. These photos give you a close-up, some existing site photos and aerial views of that site. On the bottom of the screen, you'll see this view is taken from the A281 looking into the site. So it's slightly cut off, but that's the application site directly in front of you, this area just here. And that goes up as far as the extension of the runway just here. It is a hybrid application, so there's both a full element to the permission and an outline element to it. The full element forming phase 1 of the proposed development. You'll see the site plan on screen for that just here. 3 of the buildings, full permission is sought for. Building C, design and engineering, that will be use class 1. Building D, which is for car storage, and the energy centre. To give a bit of background about some of these buildings, Building C, it's a 2-storey building which will comprise of 3 sort of double-height build bay units with an open plan design. I'll show you elevations and visuals for the building on the subsequent slides. It would contain a showroom display area, staff and admin offices, meeting rooms, staff welfare facilities, and also a staff diner until that element of the scheme is implemented in the latter stages. Unit D, the car storage, that's for vehicle storage. It's a single-storey building with mezzanine office space within it, and that provides storage for a variety of vehicles used as part of research and development. That element falls within use class B8. These elevations are of Building C. The elevation on the left-hand side of the screen there, and that shows you it in the context just here. And that's this is a view of the southern elevation just here. So that's the view that you'd have from what's currently the runway running through the site. So the front elevation as it would be viewed within the site. Turning now to the full scheme, which includes the outline elements of the scheme. You'll see the car parking, which is set out around here, and the buildings focused in the middle. Turning to the very centre of the scheme, Building B, this is the proposed diner. There's a Building F just here. Building C, and Building A just here is the main headquarters building, so that would really be the flagship building that you'd see on entering the site just here. A few more points to make about the layout. It does include a total of 427 parking spaces to be provided, and that is a level which accords with the Council's parking guidelines. And the proposal maintains a 15-metre buffer to the ancient woodland to the north. This existing woodland here, that is an area of ancient woodland, and this is the buffer here which would be provided, and that's 15 metres, which accords with the standing advice on that matter. Turning to the outline element of the application in more detail, there's a slightly more close-up view for you just here, and a proposed section coming through, which you'll see at the bottom of the screen. This is a side view showing you Building A, which is headquarters building. In the background, you'll see Building B, which is the diner, and F, the car company. So this is taken from the right-hand side, from the A281 end of the site, looking in this direction. This is a 3D image of the end product. That's got the outline element and the full element on screen for you there. Again, that's a diner in the middle just here, and this is the headquarters building you'll see at the forefront. Now take you through, this is a landscape visual image which was undertaken. This is taken from the A281. It's a before and after view. The top of the screen being the current position on site. On the bottom screen, the red dashed lines just here, that's the outline of the proposed Gordon Murray development. And also hatched faintly in the background is the new settlement scheme. So that's indicative, it's based on the indicative information which we have for that proposal at present. But that just gives you some indication of the visual impact of the proposal from that longer distance views. As you'll see, it is quite a significant distance there from the A281 as you would view that. Turning now to the proposed access for the development. The full element of the permission, phase 1, would utilise the existing access from Stovall's Hill. You'll see that indicated in yellow, the point of access just here. And access is being determined for phase 1 only of this permission. Access is a reserved matter for phase 2 onwards, the outline element of the scheme. The detailed consent for phase 2 in terms of access would be expected to utilise a new junction off the A281 to be delivered as part of the new settlement. Those are the indicative details given to us, however that will be subject to detailed consideration at the reserved matter stage. Turning to the transport mitigation and conditions which would be secured, or now recommended to be secured should permission be granted. The existing vehicular movements cap, which applies to the whole site at Dunsall Park of 3,348 per day, would be imposed. And you may well recall this from more recent permissions at the site, and that is consistent with the condition on the new settlement permission for the full permission, clearly only in place until the new road is in, but that was imposed for that. And you also will have seen it on the new business uses which were permitted to refer to it as Area C. That was back in sort of 2015 now. And you may well have seen that on site, which is under construction, and most units are now occupied, in fact, for that development. Also secured would be the provision of a full travel plan. We have an indicative travel plan submitted with this application, where the full travel plan would be secured by legal agreement and a 106 to be secured. Also to be secured would be a flexible demand responsive bus service, primarily designed around the needs of Gordon Murray employees and existing employees on the site. Provision of appropriate bus stop infrastructure for that bus service, an on-site car club scheme for use by Gordon Murray employees and existing employees, and electric vehicle charging points. So a large part of that mitigation you will likely recognise as the first phase of transport sustainability measures that were due to be developed as part of the new settlement, the first phase of that. Those measures are clearly intended to reduce the number of vehicle movements coming to and from the site and to maximise the sustainability of the site as far as possible. It would be open as part of phase 2 for the Highway Authority to request additional sustainability measures, and that will be considered in due course when that comes forward. A few further points to make on the transport element of the scheme. The travel plan submitted provides a site-specific traffic generation assessment for phase 1, and the estimated vehicular movements for phase 1 would be 457 weekday vehicular movements, and those are calculated using the existing data on travel patterns of staff at the company's existing headquarters in Shalford. The addition of Lowe's daily vehicle trips to the existing trips at Dunsfold Park, average ones, demonstrate that phase 1 could be implemented without exceeding that existing cap, which is referenced on screen. With the travel plan implementation, it's anticipated that the actual number of movements would be less. The target reduction through a travel plan would be a reduction of 10%, so that's a further 10% on top of the 457 figure that is in your report. And that, as I say, the travel plan is a matter that would be controlled by legal agreement with a programme of a review to ensure that that target is met. And the travel plan measures, some of which I've outlined already, but would also include a car share carpool scheme, which could be operated with other companies at Dunsfold Park to ensure the viability of it. Delivery and promotion of a car club. Flexible hours and working from home. Options for staff to minimise those movements. Provision of high quality teleconferencing facilities, again to support those options of working from home, and also to minimise the need for meetings off-site and on-site and travel for those. We'll move on now back to sort of the visual element of the scheme. You'll see on screen a sample of some of the materials that we propose to be used. Full details obviously sought for the full element of the scheme at the moment and are indicative in terms of the sort of materials that would be seen on the outline element of the scheme to follow. You'll see there's a mixture of aluminium cladding, mesh plant screening and buff-facing brickwork. Again, you'll see these will be showing a bit more detail on the visuals to follow. Here you'll see, this is building C, so that's one of the main building subject to the full permission before you. Moving down the courtyard view, this shows you building A, which is the headquarters, effectively the rear as the public would view the building within the site, and the diner within the centre of the site. You'll notice here that actually that there's a good level of architectural detail paid to both the interior view, which is on the bottoms of the screen, as well as to the exterior public facing element of it. Turning into some more visuals, this is building A, sort of headquarters entrance you'll see on the top just here. And moving to the bottom, the south and west elevations again of building C. On the top of the screen, this is building C and D with a bridge link between the two, and further elevations of building C. These plans here show you an indicative view of the Dunsfold Park new settlement plans. I would emphasise that those are indicative at this stage, with the Gordon Murray proposal imposed on them to give you an idea as to how it would sit. If I turn to the top right-hand screen, actually that shows you that it would extend further to the east and closer to the A281 than that previous scheme would have done. On the bottom, you'll see the detail of the layout imposed there. You'll be aware that the site is allocated for a new settlement, and that is permission for up to 2,600 homes and an expanded business park of around 26,000 square metres of additional employment floor space. That's set out in Policy SS7 of your local plan. This proposal is considered to be compliant with Policy SS7 in that it relates to the expansion of the existing business park and would fall within the total amount of floor space permitted by SS7. The proposal also sits within the application site area for the hybrid permission. I haven't got the red line on here, but it does extend beyond where this application site would extend to. And the amount of floor space proposed here would also fall within the overall quantum permitted as part of that new settlement. So this would be part of that amount and not in addition to. This is a further view here to show you an illustrative view of the proposal in the context of the new settlement. Gordon Murray design on the current proposal is shown in the distance in yellow. That's this section just here. This is the existing business park you can see on the left-hand side of the screen. Just about here as well, existing Stovall's Hill entrance is. And this indicatively shows you some of the proposed new settlement. Turning now to the key matters for consideration tonight. They are the extent to which the scheme would comply with Policy SS7 and SS7A, the impact on the existing new settlement permission, compliance with the environmental impact regulations. The proposal is accompanied by an environmental statement, which is an addendum to the original Dunsfold Park environmental statement submitted under WA 2015-2395. That has been, the environmental statement is assessed by consultees and is considered to comply with the minimum information requirements set out in those regulations. In terms of access, traffic and transport, I have discussed previously. Turning to economic issues, worth noting that Gordon Murray are an existing employer currently based in Shalford, employing over 130 people at present. The scheme is likely to generate approximately 40 to 50 full-time equivalent construction jobs during the first third of the programme and approximately 100 for the final two-thirds. It's worth noting that you'll see from your update sheet that the Council's Economic Development team has expressed support for the proposal. And on which note, I'll turn your attention to the update sheet for this item. You'll see a couple of additional responses which are included on there. There is the additional response from the Council's Economic Development team, and there are also 2 additional representations which are primarily relating to traffic impacts. There are also some additional comments from Rutland, Dunsfold Airport, who have provided a letter of support. What this letter does do is give you some additional guidance on the proposed timeframes for the development of the new settlement. It advises that the next stage, really, beyond the Gordon Murray application, is likely to be an application for a new access to serve the new settlement. So there are no other intended applications which are likely to come forward between this application tonight and that next access application. Hopefully those timeframes are helpful. The recommendation remains as set out in the agenda report. That's set out on page 60. And recommendation A is that permission be granted, subject to the conditions outlined, and also securing a legal agreement to secure those transport sustainability improvements. Recommendation B, contained on 79, addresses the eventuality that the legal agreement is not completed. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Turn to public speaking. I call on Simon Wakefield. You have 4 minutes, sir, from the time you start speaking.
Yeah. Good evening. There's a number of materially incorrect facts, I think, on that proposal. And it goes back to the Secretary of State's decision letter, which was dated on the 29th of March 2018, where he laid out clear development plans. And he said no development can take place until a new access road from the 281 has been installed. And access to the park via Stovall's Hill will be closed within 12 weeks of opening this new access road. No construction vehicles being used on Stovall's Hill. By stating that this is a new site, forms part of the Dunsfold Park development, but it's apparently a standalone scheme, is not correct. I mean, it can't be both. This is what we don't quite understand. It is part of it. And then why, in that case, isn't it forming part of land that was originally designated for these industrial units, rather than going onto some land which has been designated as green open space? Interesting to see the letter from Dunsfold Park today, which basically confirms that the new access road application is being put in, and it should be complete within 6 months of approval. Can we please have an assurance that the traffic, in particular construction traffic, would use the new road and not Stovall's Hill? Stovall's Hill is not suitable for heavy access. Children, particularly from the travellers community, regularly play on the road, and it's been designated as unsuitable for HGVs, yet people regularly use it. The verges are being broken, the curbs are already suffering. There's a blind corner, there's a blind junction at Hall Place, and the floor it regularly floods. There's no room for additional paving or anything. I do understand the traffic count should not exceed 3,348 vehicles in any single day, not as an average, but any single day. And I understand it's already being broken. So I find that hard to believe that it won't be broken going forward. Apparently, Gordon originally estimated 720 vehicle movements, but then it was revised down to 457. But it's one or the other. usually the vehicle numbers will go up as it progresses, so it will only go up. The community north of the development has really not been consulted, and it's not been mentioned tonight. Every other area, south, west and east, has been mentioned, but nothing from the north. And there's approximately 250 residents there that have a beautiful view of it. And there's no talk about covering it or screening it, and the cops there won't do the job. It will only do it if you look directly on it. So, yeah, we haven't been discussed. So if it could be screened, that would be helpful. If the weight or the new access road can be put in place, that would be good. That's really where we're coming from. And it's going next to the Jigsaw School, which apparently is especially for autistic children. So I wonder if all this construction of the site in that right next door to the school will have a negative impact on them. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wakefield. Call on Stephen Haynes.
Can I just ask if that is a solitary personal objection or if it is on behalf of one of the local organisations? I'm a little unclear.
It's personal. I live nearby.
Thank you.
I live on Hall Place.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stephen Haynes. I am Chairman of Dunsfold Parish Council. Dunsfold Parish Council supports this application. The development will bring skilled engineering employment opportunities to the area, and this is to be welcomed. This is exactly the sort of development that should be encouraged in Dunsfold Aerodrome. We have a well-educated and skilled workforce in the area with a remarkable heritage and innovative and well-beaten design and engineering. Dunsfold Parish Council sees this application as an opportunity to build on our legacy. Having said that, we are concerned about road access with the development taking place before the new entrance onto the A281 is completed. We are also concerned that the development is eating into green space, and we would like to see a guarantee that this is not lost. The location of this development is not within the business and light industrial areas shown on site plans we have seen to date, and the Parish Council would like to ask, where is the promised detailed master plan? A quarter of the aerodrome is within our parish, and we feel that we have a right to know what is planned and even perhaps have a say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Haynes. Call on Dermot Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gordon Murray Design were established in 2007 and are an award-winning local company who have gained an enviable global reputation for innovative design and lightweight manufacturing methods, many of which are suitable for sustainable vehicles, autonomous pods, and all other aspects of the automotive industry. GMD's core group currently occupy 3 buildings at Shalford and 7 at Dunsfold. This fragmentation of the business location leads to constant operational issues. The Shalford base is also subject to a short tenancy agreement currently. With ever-increasing long-term contracts and full order books for its products, GMD needs this purpose-built HQ at Dunsfold, in what we recognise will go on to provide a site of sufficient size and flexibility, ready for occupancy mid-2021 and is vitally important for the continued growth of Gordon Murray Design. Currently employing 130 people, the majority of which live within a comfortable commuting distance from our current base in Shalford. Central to the growth of GMD is the need to retain its highly skilled staff. Alternative sites were made available to GMD and the possibility explored to relocate the business to the Midlands, where many opportunities exist for manufacturing and technology companies. But GMD has no desire to move away from the area it has been established in since 2007. It remains loyal to its many highly skilled and long-term employees, plus the many local service providers and suppliers it has established long, solid working relationships over the years. Gordon Murray Design stands for innovation in all areas of design, and we wish to continue in this vein well into the future at the Dunsfold headquarters campus. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Now, finally, Councillor Edwards had indicated he wished to speak on this matter. He's also a member of the committee now, so do you want to carry on, Councillor Edwards?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to defer until I've heard the rest of the members speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, up to you. Actually, no, John. Okay. Can I start with John Gray? Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Most of this does sit in my area, so it is right I start. I'll just go to a couple of points. I think Gordon Murray is a company of a great reputation. I think we all accept that. A world-class establishment and a sort of company we dearly would want in Waverley, which is why on page 12, it's actually quite disappointing where the officer's report says they've encouraged applicants to undertake consultation prior to submission. This was not undertaken. I think this is really disappointing when we're trying to work so hard with Dunsfold Park and other agencies and other companies, and they fail to actually engage with the community. I think that's very disappointing and a very poor showing, if I'm honest. I just want to talk about vehicle movements, page 47. It's been mentioned in some detail by some of the speakers as well as Rachel. Page 47, starting on the third paragraph, it talks about averages. Now, within this chamber, there's many people sit within the Dunsfold Liaison Group meeting, and we've never dealt with averages. We have a cap of 3348, and on a daily basis, it either meets that or exceeds it. So I'm very disappointed, and I have raised this prior to tonight's meeting, to start changing and talking about averages after years and years and years of having a cap which we just deal with that is really, really disappointing. Because I think it was said, well, we're probably, the average is you'll be okay. Well, if we've got 457 additional movements, if they're added to, say, the last 12 months worth of daily figures, how many times would we have exceeded? And I have raised this, it's not something I've thrown out tonight, I've raised this before. A cap is a cap and we should deal with it the same way. And then we go to the condition 4 and we talk about a cap and a figure and we don't talk about averages. I just think for consistency, we should have just talked in this report about the cap. So I'll leave it as that. Members, you know, members will have heard my point. It's also been mentioned several times about the additional green space and the master plan and how we're going to compensate. And I appreciate Gordon Murray are the applicants. They're not the owners of the land. I suppose my point would be, I would hope that Dunsfold Park and the people here tonight would have heard those comments about additional green space being found to compensate and listen to the views of members. Throughout the report, page 37 is just one of them, talks about we need more tree and hedge planting. It's mentioned on numerous occasions. I just would like some reassurance from Rachel that the conditions are strong enough to ensure that. And I know somewhere in the report, and having read it, I can't find it, it talks about 10 years maintenance rather than 5 years being recommended. I could not see that in the conditions. If I've missed that, apologies. So if we could find that condition and just ensure it says... Right, if it actually says the 10 years in the conditions, yeah. So it's page 38. I just want confirmation of the condition. It does say 10 years, so I think once you've read it, you can't find it. So I'm glad, thank you for confirming that. I'm disappointed in some of the elements of the report, but I'm also keen that we get some really good quality companies in Dunsfold. So I look forward to hearing my colleagues' additional comments, but I'll say no more at this stage.
Thank you. Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for indulging me to let my colleague go first. I think that it's important we say that there has been extensive briefing on this application, both for planning members and also potentially for local parish councils who want to take it up. Dunsfold Park have gone to quite lengths to explain the issues associated with this application, the impact on their master plan and the timing, and the reasons why, in order to attract Gordon Murray, certain things had to be done. And I'm pleased that they are keen to attract Gordon Murray. Gordon Murray is a feather in anybody's cap. It's a really brilliant company, brilliant leadership, and it certainly shows a lot of vision and raises the bar for potential candidates on this site. I mean, personally, another 5 of these, perhaps we could have more business and less houses, but then you would expect me to say that, wouldn't you? I think the 3 things that we raised as concerns was on the question of access and when the road was coming in, the issue on the cap. I think we were reassured that the intention is to put forward an application for the new access road as soon as possible to confirm the master plan. And remembering that if the new access road is built, I think I'm right in saying that the caps disappear. And we can forget all this issue with daily caps. We can't forget the issues of traffic because they've been concerned and they were raised at the appropriate time and they've been covered. But we would get away with this fixation of numbers. I think it's unfortunate we're having to use Stowball's Hill. I don't see why they couldn't have come in from Compass Gate. Certainly they're heavier traffics. I think there are things that could be done to address local residents' concerns in that respect. But on balance, I feel that certainly the supplementary, if we go to page 2 of that, the additional comments from Rutland and Dunsfold Park, it's not often I actually get most of my questions answered, but my questions that I had and I raised at the time are covered there. It explains what it is, it explains their intention, it explains the lead time once we give approval. Now, we may not give approval, we might have issues with the new road, but providing it's approved and through a 6-month lead time is very encouraging. And I think there's probably a 12-month lead time on the build of Gordon Murray anyway. So I think that we will see a convergence of the various things, providing Dunsfold Park comes forward with their
plans and their access roads, and that would certainly please us. I'm very much in favour, unless I hear anything to the contrary, of this application. I'm very supportive on it, and I think it will benefit Waverley and the area particularly. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the ward members for giving a detailed view of that. It's helpful to know. I just want to firstly also express that this is a great opportunity for economic development that we shouldn't certainly turn down without very good reason. I will also just note that the objectors' objections were actually quite reasonable and don't really prevent the scheme happening. They're, I think, good things that we should be doing for those objectors, and they're quite reasonable things that can go along with an approval for this application, particularly in regards to a master plan. It sounds like from what Councillor Gray was saying that there would be ample time for the road upgrades to be delivered before Gordon Murray started, which would satisfy the objections that Mr Wakefield discussed at the beginning of the session. I just have a couple of questions. Firstly, when you have your cap at the moment, what do you actually do when it's exceeded? It sounds like it's a sort of nominal thing that's noted, but it does, I can't imagine what you could possibly do about that on the ground. And also just to confirm, is that is definitely going with the road upgrades? But no, other than that, I have personally no objections to this whatsoever, but I think if we can get Dunsfold Parish Council a master plan, look at the green space as described by the two ward members, and also look at the, confirm that the road can happen before the development starts, I think I'm more than happy to approve this myself as well. Thank you.
Councillor Forrest.
Thank you, Chairman. That came round rather quick. I absolutely think this is brilliant for Waverley. A global entity like this on that scale can only be good news, not just for Waverley, but the surrounding areas. And also, and I have to absolutely endorse everything that Councillor Gray has said so beautifully and eloquently. It really is such good news at a time when the economic uncertainty of Brexit is all we're hearing about. Here's a real feel-good story that we should all embrace, and there's many, many positives to it. We've looked at the report, which is very comprehensive. It's very good. It demonstrates the enterprise, the significant opportunities going into the future. It's ambitious, it's visionary, and it's sustainable. And I think from the Council's economic team, they truly endorse this as being a very good opportunity for Waverley. I always have a little bit of a problem when we come to talking about caps. Because when we're talking about caps, what we're saying is we're stifling growth. And we shouldn't be stifling growth. You wouldn't be putting caps on Sainsbury's or any of the major supermarkets going in and out of Waverley. So why are we capping businesses that need to thrive and move around? But I appreciate caps are there for a reason. But I do, as I say, have a problem because we shouldn't be stifling industry. We should be encouraging it at all costs. All the negatives that I've heard, and there are a few, I think are far outweighed by all the benefits that we all get to see. And this borough should be very proud that it can have this in its borough. So I think there's many positives. I think there's a lot that we can celebrate. I think there's a lot that we can do. In terms of the access, I think it would be foolhardy of anybody to try and prevent this going ahead tonight because of the access road. We've already heard that there's an application for the new access road which will take the traffic at some point in the future. But we really need to be looking at this, the here and now, what it can bring for the borough, what it can bring, and to have it on our doorstep, I think is just incredible. So there's nothing I've heard tonight that would sway me to vote other than yes with the officers, because I think it is a real feel-good story for Waverley, and I fully endorse the officers' recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Nubiel.
Thank you, Chairman. First, I've got a question regarding the gentleman said about autistic school next to it. How far is it?
Yeah, that came back to me. I can probably measure that for you.
Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a bit disappointed that this isn't part of a master plan, as echoing what the parish council have said as well, and that it's not accommodated within the existing commercial area. This is a sensitive area within the AONB, with the impact on the AONB and also the AGLV. And I'm not quite certain why it's not being accommodated nearer to the commercial area. Perhaps officers could explain that one. The actual visual impact of this will be quite high from the AONB, and I noticed that the Natural England talked about green roofs and also using a muted colour palette. I think it mentioned greys, dark greys and light greys. I don't see the Natural England green roof as a condition, and I haven't seen the grey colour palette also as a condition, so that would be definitely something I would like to see. The impact on the environment will be high. In the addendum, it mentioned a review by the Surrey Wildlife Trust that was pending at the time, and also that's mentioned in the Surrey County Council, their review of the environmental statement. And I couldn't actually find that on the application, the Surrey Wildlife Trust response. So perhaps officers could just confirm where that actually is. Moving on, there are also concerns about water. There was an objection on the application by Thames Water, originally on the sewage, and they put that in twice, and then it seems to have, so the last time on the 22nd of January, on the 11th of February, then they had no objection. Well, they didn't say no objection, but there didn't seem to be an objection on the email about the wastewater. So I can't see why they removed their objection. I can't see the details of why that was no longer an issue. And this is a concern for me because of the Cranley sewage treatment works, which currently takes the waste from Dunsfold Aerodrome. And I really do want to know where that waste is actually going, because within the master plan, it was meant to be going on a sewage treatment plant on site. So please could you confirm where that wastewater is actually going now? As well as that, there's an inability of the existing water network to cope as well with this building. I know that's been conditioned, but that is a concern for me. Moving on, I mean, this is a good company, they're innovative, they've got vision. I was disappointed that they didn't use some of that innovation and vision perhaps more in the design of the building, using more sustainable building methods and also water-saving methods. And I was disappointed that they were putting in a gas boiler. I'm not sure what the gas boiler is going to be run on, normal gas. That was really, really disappointing to see that. And not more use of some. They've got solar panels, I see, on Building C, but I couldn't see any other renewable energy policies being used. And that was a disappointment because I know they're involved in innovation for sustainability for vehicles, and I would have liked to have seen some of that used in this building. Perhaps we can condition whether or not that has to be a gas boiler. I thought we're looking to phase out gas boilers from 2025, and perhaps that could be something that could be within the actual application itself. The BREEAM standards, the condition, was very disappointed when the government got rid of BREEAM standards for residential. We do have a condition 32, and within the design and access statement, it does mention about BREEAM standards. And I'm disappointed that that condition is not stronger, and we're not going for very good, and we're allowing a leeway out of that. I would really like to see that as much stronger condition, and I'm sure that Gordon Murray would like to have a building that does actually meet higher sustainability criteria. One of the last points I just want to make is, could somebody please tell me the maximum height of this building that we're approving tonight on the actual, reserve matters part, the full application part? What is the highest point of the building? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Chairman. Are we going to get an answer to Councillor Townsend first, or shall I plough in?
Rachel, are you ready?
Thank you, yes. Might just jump back actually to the question about the distance to the Jigsaw schools. I've just been looking at that for you. I can only estimate it because I haven't got it plotted, but I can sort of give you an idea on the separation. Yeah, that's no problem. Let me just find the best plan for you. So this sort of gap and buffer here, you're looking at least sort of 50 to 70 metres there. And obviously, once you're actually within the site, the buildings themselves, you'll see our sort of another 50 to 100 metres pushed away from that boundary. So we are talking about quite significant distances there. What we would do, of course, as well, is secure a construction management plan, and that will ensure that sort of good practice measures are adhered to. And you'll be aware that the applicant does, that the landowner here does have control over the wider site, so there is a wider interest to ensure the tenants are able to continue to operate at the site. Thank you.
Have you got the height of the buildings in the full application? Rachel? Or while Rachel's finding that, do you want to come back, Councillor Neal? Do you want to come back?
Thank you, Chairman. I've just been told that the Jigsaw School is moving from there. Plus, being authority, as my daughter is autistic, it won't disturb it at all. And for the highest level of autism. The second thing is I recommend, as Councillor Gray and Franciski, I back them up for that. For the approved, but the access road should be there. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Chairman. It's always good, isn't it, to hear the local view. I read the report and I was really quite excited by it. And when the public speakers came out and then the local members, you sort of expect a whole load of objections and things to come out that you hadn't spotted in the report. And I do take on board all the points that have been raised. I think this is just such good news for Waverley. I appreciate there will be increased traffic. As you know, we've perfected traffic in Farnham. We love it to bits. You know, the longer we queue, the better we like it. So, you know, I appreciate that there will be problems with traffic, and obviously they should be mitigated, as Rachel has said. The other thing, and I've said it 100 times in this council chamber, that even when permission, if we grant permission tonight, is granted, consultation should just carry on and on and on. Work with your local community, talk to your local community. That way everyone benefits. And certainly I'm nothing like as green as Councillor Townsend, I'm afraid, but anything we can do to make the buildings more energy sufficient, if that's the word, efficient, I suppose I'm trying to say, that would be good. And obviously landscaping, because as somebody again said, this is a sensitive area and we do want the buildings to be landscaped. We're always disappointed when we see industrial buildings. We always want the Taj Mahal, don't we? And, you know, we look at this and think, oh, it's a bit square. But then, you know, it's got to be fit for its purpose. And that's one thing we've learned over the years sitting in this chamber. So I just think this is such good news. I appreciate the problems locally, and I hope those are addressed. I hope the new road comes in quickly. I hope we minimise the effect, the downsides for the local residents. But I just think to have employment like this, I hope it's the start of you know, more and more people coming to Waverley to bring the opportunities for people to work and live in the area, because at the moment there are very, very few, and people are making huge long journeys to access employment. So I think this is good news all round.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dean, if you want to come back before the others step in.
Yes, thank you very much. I think it was mentioned earlier that we shouldn't get fixated on the cap. The reason why I mentioned the cap was Surrey County Council Highways said that was the number which was safe on the roads, and have reaffirmed that on several applications since. So it's not a matter of being fixated, it's about safety. Having said that, as I wasn't at the last briefing for family reasons, it's fantastic news about the road being hopefully coming forward. It's one of the questions myself and Rachel spoke about, and I said that was really important to give residents in Alfold and Dunsfold some light at the end of the tunnel. So that is great news. I couldn't agree more with all my colleagues that this is a brilliant application, but I think it was only right to raise publicly my concerns about the report and the cap and the way it was done, but that doesn't take away my support and my hope that they do come to Dunsfold Park.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, indeed, I feel overwhelmingly in support of my colleagues and their judgments. There's just a question that I have, however. Page 16, Busbridge Parish Council specifically refer to Station Lane, Salt Lane, Marwick Lane as being ignored in the transport assessment. Now, of course, that linkage is covering the sort of wider traffic aspects. And yet later on, the County Highway Authority, in their paragraph on page 18, the proposal would satisfactorily mitigate the highway impacts in terms of highway safety, capacity and transport sustainability. Is it possible to tell me exactly what the mitigations that are being provided, which would also satisfy the fact that Station Lane, Salt Lane, Marwick Lane have been considered? Thank you.
Hey, Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too support this application, but I do not think this building lends itself to a green roof because of the type of business it is. Having worked at a company that started on a farm and built up to a multi-million company all over the world, you know, you need to be realistic when you plan these buildings. A green roof would not suffice on a building like this.
Thank you. Rachel, have you got the answer to the height of the building?
Yes, I've probably got a few questions to respond to, so I'll do my best to go through those for you. I'll start with the height of the building. I'm focusing on building C. It's probably the larger of the buildings which are subject of the full permission element. So I'll just give you a few spot heights to make sure I'm on the right plan. Yep. So this section here, you're looking at sort of 9.3 metres in height. And probably to look at the highest point will be just about here, where you're looking at around 12 metres in height. So I hope it gives you some idea there of the scale going forwards. Taking a few more, starting with your questions in turn. Surrey Wildlife Trust, they have not provided comment on this application. Nonetheless, it obviously has been through Natural England, and we have reviewed the reports which have come in from them. However, they haven't commented specifically on this proposal. Clearly, we have, however, recommended quite detailed conditions in respect of the wildlife impact. You'll notice that it does sit outside of the special protection areas, and there's no buildings to be demolished on site. Nonetheless, there are mitigation measures specifically, primarily in terms of reptiles. The main habitat that would be lost here would be the sort of green grass area. That's the main area to be affected on site, and so detailed mitigation measures would be secured as part of those planning conditions. Turning to landscape impacts and Natural England as well, you have noted correctly their reference to considering the use of green roofs. It's worth distinguishing at this point between the outline and the full elements of the scheme. Correct, there are no green roofs proposed as part of the full element of the scheme. However, if I turn you to the outline element of the scheme, you'll see those are really the more sensitively positioned buildings, in that those outline elements of the scheme are the ones sort of facing the A281s, the most prominent buildings. And certainly it's something that we will look at and consult with Natural England when we get to the reserve matter stage for that. So that includes appearance and landscaping. So that is the area where we would see those coming forward, and we consider it appropriate that that would be the stage to consider those at that point. In terms of landscaping, there's also been some discussion about the landscaping buffers on site. We do have detailed conditions in respect of the full element of the permission. That's the element of landscaping we're proposing considering tonight. In terms of the outline element of the scheme, the landscaping reserve matters application is yet to come to us, and that, as I say, is primarily sort of the top and the eastern part of the site, which we would need to consider. So absolutely, that's one of the top considerations in assessing that, and it will be looked at. Naturally, it will be consulted further as we move through that process. Turning to the conditions on drainage, we have reviewed that process, and technical information was submitted to Thames Water, which ultimately alleviated their concerns. You'll be aware we have got quite detailed information, conditions on there securing sustainable drainage. There's a lot of suds incorporated within the large parking areas you'll see here, so that's a large element of the drainage on site. I haven't got all the information to hand in terms of your questions and in terms of the sewerage and where that would go, but I'm happy to follow that up and answer that in due course. Moving on, I think the next questions were primarily in relation to transport points. Perhaps I'll turn to the vehicular cap which applies there and its reference in the report. The reference to averages is for the purposes of calculating both the average vehicle movements for Gordon Murray and whether they're likely to fall underneath that. And for that, an average has been taken over that traffic data over the last 6 months. In fact, beyond that, but I've got the 6 months here to refer to tonight, but certainly that traffic movements and counting, which, as you know, it is reported to the liaison group quite regularly, has been used and scrutinised both in the travel plan and the figures used by the applicant, as well as by the County Highway Authority. And that is one of the reasons why access is a reserve matter for Phase 2. The County Highway Authority are only satisfied that Phase 1 can be accommodated exists within that cap, and therefore acceptable to use the existing access of Stubbolds Hill. Based on the indicative timeframes of Dunsfold Park and bringing forward a new access, it's certainly hoped by all parties that, in fact, it may not even be necessary, and actually that access will hopefully be in place before that. But clearly this is currently a standalone application, and without that detailed access for the new roads in, we can't give you complete certainty on that point at the moment, but nonetheless, I hope that helps to understand the intention. So it would allow Phase 1 to be occupied, but no more beyond that before a new, more suitable access was imposed. It's worth noting that the cap was imposed. Highway safety was an element, but primarily it's also about the impact on the countryside, impact on neighbours, and those other elements in terms of the justification for that. Certainly the County Highway Authority are satisfied that use of Stubbolds Hill as an access would not compromise highway safety points. One of the conditions is the construction management plan, so certainly we could look at whether the most appropriate use for certainly large vehicles is via Stubbolds Hill, or actually whether Compass Gate could be an appropriate use. Certainly it's a point we could explore with them in discharging that condition were permission to be approved tonight. Turning to the other, there was also a condition about sustainability and referring to the BREEAM standards. So condition 32, it is seeking to achieve a very good standard of BREEAM, and that's consistent with the requirement that's been placed on the wider Dunsfold Park scheme, including the more recently approved business units which are further west on the site, and also the new settlement as and when that comes forward. I think there's questions as well regarding the loss of open space. This is really a matter that we'll be controlling through the development of the new settlement. That's both through the master plan, and also we have the existing legal agreement which is secured for the new settlement does have minimum open space requirements set out within that. So as and when the new settlement is developed, which this scheme may well end up being part of, there is a safeguard there to ensure that there is the overall amount of open space is retained as part of that development. It is worth noting that when the new settlement permission was considered, we didn't have set footprints there. We will see that come forward in the reserve matters applications in due course. There is a change from the new settlement permission. I'll just change slides for you quickly. You'll see here that there is a deviation because the commercial space is extending further east and closer to the A281. In terms of a bit of a background and also to refer to the Jigsaw School, the current position of Jigsaw School prevents Gordon Murray's being sited any further west based on its current temporary permission. As part of the new settlement scheme, the Jigsaw School would be relocated within the education hub, much more central within the site. There clearly is a conflict there in terms of timescales and bringing forward the Gordon Murray proposal imminently to accommodate the move from their existing premises in Shalford. So that's a large part of the reasoning for why they have sought permission for the scheme where it is. I'm jumping around slightly, but you also asked me a question about the vehicular cap and what would happen if it was breached and referenced over the last sort of 6 months to 12 months. I'll start, what I've got here, what I've calculated is for the last 6 months. So I've got, looking through those data, there were sort of seven occasions across the 6 months when that cap would have been exceeded. You'll be aware, and it is on record from previous Dunsfield liaison meetings, there have been the odd occasion when that cap has been breached. What I say is that you've got two methods of security in terms of this proposal. Firstly is that condition which will continue to be monitored by the council and by the enforcement team on an ongoing basis. The second factor is the legal agreement regarding the travel plan, where that would be a target within the travel plan for them to seek to achieve. Were they to not adhere to that, we will be looking, and the County Highway Authority will be looking to secure additional sustainability measures to further bring that figure down. So it's really a two-pronged attack there to ensure that they are adhering to that vehicular cap. Apologies if I've missed any questions, but I think that probably addresses at least the majority for now.
Just one, I think, probably the gas boiler. Do you have any information on that? No, okay, fine. I've got one person who hasn't spoken yet and then 4 who want to come back. So, Councillor Adam.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've been looking at these diagrams about the site for this development, which I agree with my colleagues is absolutely brilliant. I can't see whether, in fact, the site actually is bordered to the east exactly on the boundary of Dunsfold Park property, or whether there is buffer space between the edge of the site on the east and there, yes, whether there's buffer space to the east, because we're worrying about you know, the view and everything, and it's the way it looks from the 281, etc. But if there's buffer space there, obviously Dunsfold Park could actually put more trees and things in to obscure the view more easily.
Rachel?
Thank you. Yes, just to jump in. I haven't got a plan to show you the extent of the ownership, but it does extend further east beyond that. So, yes, there is other land within the applicant's control which we could look to secure further landscaping for if necessary. However, I would advise that as part of this application, we have asked them to demonstrate that there is space for a 15-metre buffer within the site, but nonetheless, there is that additional space going forward.
Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to come back. I mean, I think it is important that our briefing did explain why certain changes happened, and this is an opportunity that's coming forward, perhaps a bit prematurely from the master plan, but the balance is, do they turn around to Gordon Murray and say, well, go and find someone else, or just sit on your thumb for a bit while we try and sort out this? And I think they put across very carefully that although they were making some compromises to this, it wasn't going to exceed the floor areas, it wasn't going to do this, it will be taken into account on the master plan. And I think to address some comments that we've had about traffic, We lost the argument on traffic in the application and in the local plan. We have concerns about traffic, and when that road comes in, the cap gets removed. We get off this fixation of worrying about a cap on a daily basis. But then come in the highways mitigations, which was all agreed as part of the application. I think the one thing that impressed me from the briefing is we're dealing here with Gordon Murray. Gordon Murray has this in mind as being his legacy. Gordon Murray is a design expert. This building has some very good, outstanding design characteristics. In terms of the size of buildings, it is not out of keeping with the buildings that are already there on Dunsfold Park. And rather than seeing it as a detriment, I see this as a flagship, which I hope would influence other people on the site. I think we raised some issues about gas boilers and other things, and I don't want to appear to be an advocate for Dunsfold Park, but they do have a lot of sustainability actions in there. They have the solar panels, they have the biogas, they've got plans which are within the master plan, and I think they're doing an awful lot on there, and I believe that Gordon Murray themselves have intentions of being as sustainable as possible. Yes, I agree with Councillor Townsend that where we feel there's gaps in the conditions, we should put them in. But I think we should understand that here is somebody who's not just going to be an exciting employer, but someone who wants to make a statement with his investment on Dunsfold Park. Thanking you for letting me come back on that.
And somewhere where you would want to go to work. Councillor Townsend.
I'm sorry, I'm not putting a dampener on the actual application itself and the people that are applying. I said previously they are doing a lot of work in innovation, sustainability. However, I am horrified, and I'm not understating that word, that we have no details of the Surrey Wildlife Trust. It states it in the environmental addendum that the Surrey Wildlife Trust were doing a review at the time that they did this addendum. Where is that review? Stated within the Surrey County Council, their review of the environmental statement, they said that we should, as the planning authority, be taking into the advice of the Surrey Wildlife Trust. This is not putting down anything to do with the building or the employers. This is to do with the environment. It's an EIA development. One thing we should have is something from the Surrey Wildlife Trust. I can't see it against the application. I'm hoping that officers do have it. And if not, I could not approve this application if I did not have something from them.
Thank you. It's that time when I must put to the meeting, we either adjourn the meeting, we agree to a half-hour extension to 10:30, at which time the meeting shall stand adjourned, or continue the meeting until the Council has concluded its consideration of the agenda, or adjourning the meeting. Can I have a recommendation, please? My recommendation is that we continue the business until we're finished. Is that agreed? Thank you. Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Chair. I apologise to Councillor Forashevsky for having to pick on a particular point that she mentioned here. I don't believe that we should always be supporting industry at all costs. There are some costs that are too high. Sometimes we do have to think about what those are. Now, I am quite sensitive to the issues that Councillor Townsend is adequately putting across here, and I would like to also see those Surrey Wildlife Trust documents as well before I can support this. I also think it would be a good idea if we could try and encourage more sustainability from our industry as much as we possibly can. So I agree this is a fantastic scheme, but I would also like to see those now those points have been raised. Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel.
Thank you. Yes, certainly, and you will have noted it from the officer report, there is reference to seeking the comments of Surrey Wildlife Trust. One suggestion I would make is that the recommendation A is subject to those comments from the Surrey Wildlife Trust before us granting permission. They have been consulted and but we don't have the comments tonight. The recommendation in any event is subject to the legal agreement being completed. So certainly we can continue to press them for those comments, and clearly if it raises issues, we would have to bring it back to committee for your further consideration.
Excuse me, can I come back, Chairman?
Indeed.
This is an EIA development. We have to have that. We cannot defer it on that basis. We have to have that information. So unfortunately, I would have to propose that we defer it pending getting that information. We cannot decide this tonight. Thank you.
I will turn to the lawyers first. Yes, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I just had a quick discussion with my fellow officers. My understanding is that we have sent a consultation out to them. They haven't necessarily come back and said that they intend to respond or provide any comments in response. It may be that they do still intend to. Equally, it may be that they don't propose to respond. I'm not sure the position is clear in that respect, but nevertheless, I'm not aware of any requirements in the regulations that expressly require us to obtain that consultation response before concluding that the environmental impact assessment is adequate so as to allow the committee to resolve to grant planning permission. I would personally support Rachel's suggestion of making the resolution subject to receiving their comments first and resolving any issues that they may have in the event that they do have any, if members are concerned by it. But I would prefer that we didn't attach that condition simply because I don't think it's necessary in order to proceed. I think members may lawfully proceed on the basis that the environmental statement is acceptable and has been found so, particularly by our external consultant. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Townsend.
I'm sorry, but is the external consultant then Surrey County Council? They're in the review of the environmental statement. Is that our external consultants? Because they make several references to information from the Surrey Wildlife Trust. They make several points that we have to take those comments into account. So I understand what you are saying. However, specifically that outside consultant specifically states, Surrey Wildlife Trust, specifically within the environmental, the addendum, it states that there was a review underway at the time of this submission. So where is that information? If we find out afterwards that there is some key environmental impact, how will we all feel? It is our duty to ensure that the damage to the environment is also taken into account.
Apologies, I don't know the precise conclusions. My understanding was that the environmental statement had been found to be acceptable. I wasn't aware that that was subject to first receiving comments back. I appreciate that they may have referred to reviews that were being undertaken, but my understanding is that the response from the consultant is unequivocal insofar as they accept that it is acceptable. They are only consultants. We choose to consult with them because of their expertise. Ultimately, the decision is for us as the competent authority. But if my understanding is correct and that that response is unequivocal, I would be happy for the committee to proceed this evening. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Forrest.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for allowing me to come back. And thank you, Councillor Follows, for being gentle on me. I do appreciate it. And I couldn't let this moment go without picking up on one point. And again, I'm Councillor Gray. I think I'm buying you a drink after this tonight. I can't let this moment go without talking about traffic movements. Whilst I appreciate what's been said about the capping and the reason why the caps are there, because highway safety issues, I'd like to cast our minds back to whoever made the decision to put 1,700 homes in Cranley over a bridge with only one-way traffic. That poses far more risk than what is happening here. So I beg to differ on what was said earlier on. There's lots to be supportive of this application tonight. The travel plan, the car sharing, all of that. It's incredible what's actually taking place here. The Jigsaw School, I was fortunate enough in my capacity as Deputy Mayor to go to the Adult Centre just a few weeks ago. And this is really creative, visionary buildings. It sits beautifully into the landscape. And as Carol Coburn said, they're built fit for purpose. So I don't think anyone need worry about how creative the site is and how it will fit into the landscape. Again, a point that Carol Coburn made, and I want to pick up on it, which I think is really, really important, is this business about consultation and ongoing. There is a liaison group. A lot of the stuff that we've heard tonight can be aired through that liaison group. So things like this don't start off, they start off brilliantly, and then they get better because people talk, and changes have to be made at some stage to actually come to the end result. But I think this council has to be really proud of itself that we look at this site of only a few years ago was the biggest brownfield site in the borough, being completely underutilised, and now it is something different. It's going to be a mixed-use new settlement, and now with a global enterprise, Gordon Murray, who he didn't get where he is today without knowing what he was doing, and his whole ethos is built on good design. So I don't think we need worry about some of the aspects. I would not support a deferral this evening. I think that is not the right thing to do, although I accept the concerns Councillor Townsend has. But I would, if I may, just like to ask Rachel to repeat what she'd said about addressing the issue so members can be comfortable that that issue is being addressed.
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you for the questions. I understand it's a question about the sort of mitigation we can take into account for the environmental impact assessment. Certainly, we are required, and perhaps this partly answers the early questions, we are required to take into account consultee comments which we receive. That has been done. We've certainly done an extensive consultation. Certainly where we identify mitigation recommended, that is secured either by condition or by legal agreement. And the advice from the Surrey County Council and says the overarching environmental statement reviews that as an appropriate content. Clearly they recommend as well that we do have regard to those responses of consultees, which has been done where received. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hyman.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, in respect of our legal position, in respect of environmental impact assessment, if we consider this evening that the environmental impact assessment is incomplete and we can identify what it is about the EIA or environmental statement that is deficient, then we are entitled to ask that the applicant provide under Regulation 25, I think it is now, it used to be Regulation 19, it kept increasing over the years, but I think it's Regulation 25 notice that we'd need to serve on to the applicant, and they would need to provide us with the additional information that we consider to be missing. We can't obviously expect the applicant to require that Surrey Wildlife Trust respond. It's not in the power of the applicant to demand that Surrey Wildlife Trust respond. So I have a little bit of difficulty of this. Ultimately, the question is, has an assessment been conducted, and we are the people who decide whether that assessment is satisfactory and whether the conclusions are satisfactory. And I fully appreciate the position of Councillor Townsend, because, you know, there is a gap in the information there. But on the balance of what the officers have said, I don't see that there is any significant gap in the assessment, anything that has been identified as a problem that you know, we would want to hold this up on. So if there was something major that had been identified and was still outstanding, then I would have a very great concern and be very supportive, because, you know, I've been banging on about this for years, and I would be very concerned if I considered that there was a problem there. I'm just wondering, has any problem been identified that you know, we may need to put identify mitigation for, and be satisfied that that mitigation was going to be provided? Because I don't know that that is the problem. It may just be that Surrey Wildlife Trust don't see any problem and aren't concerned and haven't responded because of it. And for us to hold this up on those grounds, we have no legal basis on which we can do that. We have to be perfectly reasonable, and I haven't yet heard anything identified where there is a problem there. In terms of the other issues of this development, I'm absolutely satisfied that this is a flagship development for Dunsfold Park, for Gordon Murray. I do not think they would want anything at all to you know, for people to criticise about. Short-term, possibly some traffic problems, and that we can't shoot people if they're about to drive into the place so that they stay under the 3348 number magically or some whatever. That's unfortunate, and yeah, we can't do anything about it, so why do we have the numbers there? But Surrey are perfect, of course. They know they should be out there shooting the people for us, I gather. I think it's absolutely disgraceful, though, Chairman, that Councillor Forashevsky should mention Brexit in this planning meeting. Thank you.
Right, I was going to say, Surrey Wildlife have only had 5 months to answer anything, haven't they? But Paul, you wanted to come in on that.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to draw members' attention to page 32 and page 33. The last but one paragraph, which comments on Surrey County Council's in-house environmental assessment in relation to ecology and nature conservation. It goes on to say Natural England have raised no objections. And then in relation to conditions, then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 bullet points which outline the matters that we would look to seek through condition. And then finally, in response to the point that Councillor Hyman raised, is in terms of our satisfaction that the environmental survey and company reports are sufficient to identify the likely impacts of development, and hence the conditions as outlined.
Paul, Councillor Follows.
Withdrawn, Chair. Thank you.
Have the officers any further comments to make? Councillor Byman.
For the third time of asking, Chairman. And it's my last meeting ever. I have to say something. And the discussion has gone on for so long that what I was going to say is perhaps a bit past. But first of all, I'd like to support John Gray's point. I would much rather have seen many more of these types of developments rather than all the houses. I cannot understand how we continue to maintain the cap on transport when we always were told many years ago that everything was cleared in 2018. My calendar says it's 2019, but we're still not clear. But of course, that's only because of the access at both Stobbolds Hill and Compass Gate. Once those have gone, or at least they've been, something else has improved with the access into 281, that changes. Otherwise, we would not be able to have the houses on Dunsfold Park anyway. So that would perhaps help a lot of people who don't particularly want them, but I mean, lots of people do. So, and the other point I would make about the access on Stobbolds Hill, yes, people say it's not suitable, it's too narrow, etc., etc. Try continue driving through Bramley and the very narrow parts of Bramley, which are much narrower, I think, than any of the roads, the junctions or points on Stobbolds Hill there. And the other people, of course, who will be helped by the new access, hopefully, will be the parishes of both Hascombe and Busbridge, because perhaps less vehicles will be tempted to go that way. So, but overall, I'm totally supportive of this application. I welcome it completely. I wish we had more.
Thank you. And I think you're echoing the points that Councillor Forestry made about traffic in Cranley on a one-way narrow bridge. Councillor Townsend, finally.
Thank you. I just really want clarification, seeing as there seems to be scant support for me to defer this application, which I will not be supporting tonight. But I just want confirmation that Surrey Wildlife Trust was written to by this council and that their details were actually sought. And also that if there is no support for a deferral, which there appears not to be, that there will be some kind of condition that they will seek the Surrey Wildlife Trust information. And also, I didn't get any information about where the sewage is going. Is it coming to Cranley? Thank you.
Rachel.
Rather than a condition, it'd be subject to the recommendation, so that prior to us actually granting permission, we do seek those views from Surrey Wildlife Trust, and in that time I can also provide you with the additional information on the drainage and the sewage as well. If that's supported. We did, yes.
Councillor Hyman.
Yeah, just to clarify again, Chairman, I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding. If an assessment is incomplete, then we are not able to condition it under EIA legislation. No, I mean that's you know, I've been fighting that issue for some time on the East Street scheme. Obviously, we can't do that. The issue here would be. I think we have to assume that as Surrey Wildlife Trust have not responded in the time, then we have to assume that they are not concerned, because otherwise, you know, every application we have before us, if people don't, and it is worrying. I mean, it's an imperfection in the system, but we don't have a perfect system, I'm afraid. I don't think that we can condition it, unfortunately. I fully support Councillor Townsend in what she's saying. It's unfortunate we don't have all the information we want, but we do have to make an assumption, and I think we have to make it positively in view of the MPPF. And there are no legal grounds for us, unfortunately, without any identification of an issue that we should be concerned about. That's the difficulty I have here, because I do really support what Councillor Townsend's saying. But,
right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just turn to Rachel and the officers before I move to the recommendation.
Yes, I'm not. Thank you for the opportunity to come back. Not suggesting that we condition it subject to further information or the assessment is incomplete, but rather if we have a view back from a consultee which raises something material which is different to what is in this report, prior to us granting permission, that would be a material change that we would be reverting back to you on. By way of assurance, you'll see on page 33 that an assessment has been undertaken by our officers, and that environmental study and the supporting information, which includes addressing the impacts on wildlife, are considered to be sufficient to enable us to impose those appropriate conditions. However, as stated, quite happy if the recommendation is to be amended, subject to the use of Surrey Wildlife Trust, that will simply allow us to follow up that with them, and if any unexpected issues are arisen, as I say, that would be a material change that we'd have to report back to you on prior to permission being granted. However, we're not suggesting to you that the assessment is incomplete or that the information submitted by the applicant is incomplete at this stage. Thank you.
Paul, anything else? In that case, can we move to the recommendation on page 60? Recommendation A, subject to the completion of a legal agreement by the 23rd of October 2019 to secure highway sustainability improvements and travel plan auditing fee, and subject to conditions, permission be granted. And the conditions are through to page 75. The informatives are on page 75 through to pages 79. Those in favour, please show.
In favour.
Those against? Abstentions?
1 abstention.
Thank you. Permission is granted, and there isn't a condition B, is there? Recommendation.
Yes, recommendation B. No, it's on the updates on the thing.
Okay, the recommendation B, that if the requirements for recommendation A are not met, the permission be refused. Those in favour, please show. appear to be unanimous.
It's unanimous. Thank you very
Unanimous.
much.
Thank you very much indeed. That concludes our meeting. Thank you all very much indeed.